So I don't really know in terms of the audience whether we have Canadians or Europeans or what, but or whether people know about synchrotrons or the ESRF. So I put there's quite a lot of slides. I sort of did it on purpose. I put a lot of information in the slides because I thought that I guess we'll make a PDF and then at least all of the information is there, but I'll try not to spend too long on each slide. So this is how to access the ESRF. And while I was at it, a few slides about writing good proposals as well. For information, almost everything that I'm going to say, information about applying for beamtime at the ESRF is on our web pages. When you go to the ESRF homepage, there's a section called Users and Science. And in there's a section called Applying for Beamtime. And everything that you need to know is in there. So I put the link here as well. Just a really short introduction, very short, to the ESRF, because this is important, especially if there's Canadians or who will eventually be listening to this talk. So the ESRF, it's the world's brightest hard X-ray source, and it's funded by 19 different, mainly European countries, but not only. As you see, we have South Africa, for example. So there are 13 member states listed here, and 6 associate member states. And it shows here as well the percentage of the budget that they pay for the ESRF. And I won't go into any details here, but this is important for later on in terms of beamtime allocation. So just so you know, this sort of collaborative financing, which is why we're called the European Synchrotron, because we're funded by mainly European money. Okay, our synchrotron itself looks like this, with 46 beamlines all the way around the synchrotron and 2 cryo-EM stations. This is an old plot, so only one of them is shown. So it's 46 stations and 2 cryo-EM facilities. And they're listed here. So we, at the ESRF, we have public beamlines. So those are the beamlines that belong to the ESRF that are funded by our budget. And so they're called public beamlines. We have 34 of those, plus 1 public cryo-electron microscope. And on those beamlines that are listed here, I mean, it's small, you probably can't see them all, but we have all sorts. There's scattering, diffraction, imaging, spectroscopy, structural biology beamlines. And 100% of the beamtime on those beamlines is available for our public user program. And then we have 12 private CRG beamlines and 1 private cryo-electron microscope. CRG stands for Collaborating Research Group. And actually, these aren't industrial groups. These are our member countries. So, for example, BM28 is a UK, British beamline. And what that means is that one of the research councils in the UK funds and finances a specific beamline for their own use. Okay, so they're member country beamlines on which public beamtime is given, but it's not our own ESRF public beamtime. And on those beamlines, 33% of their available beamtime is given to the ESRF public program, and 66% of the beamtime is used for their what we call private CRG, but it's public. It's reviewed by the research council that is providing the money. Okay, because there's a lot of stations. On our web pages, we have a Find a Beamline tool. So you can search by beamline, by group, or by scientific domain or discipline. There's a search field where you can put in whatever you're looking for. So if you're looking for, I don't know, corrosion, diffraction, whatever, you can put the information in there and it can suggest the beamlines to apply for. I mentioned this. I borrowed the slide from Reynier Revilla, who's the European Synchrotron User Organization, because just to let you know that there's also a sort of a European wafer light database where you can look for beamlines across Europe, so not just the ESRF. That's useful. It's called wafer light. It's an excellent tool. It has a really good beamline searching tool. So, for example, you can filter by facility. So there's synchrotrons and FELs. And neutrons, I think, and then filter by technique. So, for example, you choose diffraction and then section diffraction. Discipline, you don't have to choose all of these. You can just pick, I don't know, synchrotron, or you can pick just earth sciences and see what comes up. And for example, if we put these four criteria in, the results are that there are 6 beamlines that are available, some at the ESRF, some at Elettra, and some at Petra 3. And it gives you a search result like this. So you can see the 3 beamlines at the ESRF that do this kind of work. There's a beamline at Elettra, and there are 2 beamlines at Petra. So that's a good thing to know as well. So I'm here to talk to you about public beam time rather than anything else, because I'm the head of the user office, and that's most of our beam time is public. So just to say, at the ESRF, there are three types of beam time. There's public. Basically, it's peer-reviewed by our own ESRF panels, so external experts, but appointed by the ESRF. It's free of charge, so you don't have to pay for the beam time. Because it's public, the results have to go into the public domain. So you're expected to publish results. And of course, the data, there's a data policy that means that data become public after an embargo period of 3 years that can be extended on request. And then we also provide, the ESRF provides some financial support for users. There's a slide on that at the end of the talk. On the left, the private CRG, that's I mentioned what it is also peer reviewed. So it's public beam time. It's just managed by a different set of people. It's also the access to the beam lines, the beam time you don't have to pay for. It's also free of charge, and you have to publish results as well. The only difference is, of course, the ESRF doesn't support financially the users participating in those beam times. And then, of course, we have commercial, which I just mentioned. It's easier. Commercial access is easier because it's basically purchased beam time. So it's proprietary research, which means the data are proprietary. You buy the beam time. There's no peer review, and the data belong to the people purchasing the beam time. And there, the access is very simple. Proposals exist, but the easiest thing is to just contact our business development office with this email, industry@esrf.fr. Explain what you want to do, ask for a quote, ask for suggestions of beam lines to use, etc. Okay, and they basically help and walk you through the access. So I'm going to mention just public, just so you know. So one shift is 8 hours. There are 3 shifts per day. Private CRG beam time, we deliver about 2,500 shifts per year. Commercial beam time, we deliver about 1,000 shifts per year. And of course, the big one is our public access program, which delivers about 5,000 days of beam time per year. And there's a 40 to 45% success rate with the peer review. Okay, and that's the one I'm going to talk about now. So there are some conditions for access to public beam time. So first of all, it's free of charge. As I mentioned, that's really important. But the peer review is based on scientific and or technological excellence. So that's what we're looking for. As it's publicly funded, all results must be put in the public domain. As I said, it's peer reviewed by the ESRF review panels. There's an obligation to submit an experiment report after each beam time session. Results, when possible, must be published in journals. Of course, we understand that, just because you get an experiment doesn't necessarily mean you get publishable results straight away, but as soon as they are publishable, we expect them to be published. And the ESRF public data policy applies, which means all data and reports are available publicly after 3 years. This is what I was mentioning earlier on, just so you know. Beam time at the ESRF is normally reserved for researchers who are affiliated. So it's not a question of nationality, it's a question of affiliation to laboratories in one of the ESRF's member or associate member countries. So I put them up here again to remind you which ones they are. So it's normally reserved for people from those laboratories. Researchers from labs from non-member countries can access public beam time. The best way to do it is to collaborate with somebody from a member country lab. Then it's almost treated like a member country proposal. Okay, so that one is a very easy way in, is to collaborate with researchers from our member countries, or in their own right, proposals from non-member countries can be accepted, but there's a limit. It's about 2 or 3% of the beam time, either to proposals of exceptional scientific or technological quality, or because they provide some exceptional technical benefit to the synchrotron radiation community. And in those cases, it comes out of what's called management contingency. So management reserve the right to decide whether they accept this or not. Okay, because of course, what's given to non-member countries is not given to member countries, and they're the ones who are providing the money. Okay. I also stole this rather than recreating it, because it's a very nice slide from Reynier Revilla's talk. Just the cycle, let's say, from your scientific idea to the realization of an experiment. So you have your idea or your scientific case, you collect your collaborators, you talk to beamline staff. I'll come back to that later. This beamline staff is in blue because it's important. You need to talk to the people at the synchrotrons when you're writing your proposal. You have to write and submit a proposal. There's a feasibility check done. Here it's written by the local contacts, typically done by the beamline staff. So they check it's technically feasible. And then there's a review process where they judge and assess the scientific or innovative excellence. If it gets through neither of those, it's either maybe the wrong instrument or the wrong kind of experiment, or the objectives are not clear, or it's the wrong plan. And of course, you have to go back and start again. If it's successful, you perform the experiment at the beamline, data analysis and interpretation. Then you have to submit a report on that beam time session and ideally write a paper. Okay, so that's the cycle. At the ESRF, for public beam time, we have 6 different access modes. I put in grey here the one that I'll concentrate on most today, which is standard research proposals, because 90% of our access is through standard research proposals, and that's what, if any of you apply, is what most of you would be applying for. These ones, 5 and 6, are specifically for a structural biology community. Excuse me 1 second. Actually, that I'll let that ring through. It'll ring 3 times and then pass to my team. So yeah. 5 and 6 are only for structural biology, so I don't mention them. We have standard research. Don't go away. I'm just going to put this. Done. Okay, and so we have standard, we have long-term projects, we have what's called hub proposals, and we have bag proposals. Long-term projects, there has to be a benefit for the user community. So the idea is that you collaborate with the beamline so it's not just a scientific project. There has to be some sort of benefit for the user community with investment of resources to let's say, standardize a certain measurement type, or to create a new field, or to implement a new instrumentation on the beamline. Hub proposals are very new, and they're very specific to the ESRF. This is basically where we say a community, let's say, for example, battery research, we propose significant amounts of beam time on several beamlines to communities that are willing to share their expertise. So they really work together. They agree to share data and share expertise, so that domain of research can advance much more quickly, rather than everyone doing individual work on their own side and everyone having to wait for those data to be published to use them. The idea is to gather a community together, or at least members or parts of a community together, to collaborate. Okay. Typically multi-technique, typically multimodal approaches. Okay, we have 2 hubs running at the ESRF, one on battery research, which doesn't include the whole battery research community, of course not, and another one on human organ atlas. So we're creating an atlas of human organs in healthy and diseased state to be used by the world of medics. And then the other one I mentioned here, number 4, I will mention it because it might be interesting for a community like a corrosion community, for example. We have what's called bag proposals. I'll mention them, I'll explain a little bit more, but the idea is you share the beam time. You don't have to share data, you don't have to collaborate, but you can share the beam time. So I'll come back, I'll show you why. I'll show you that in the next slide. So I'll talk mainly about standard, but I'll also mention bag proposals in this talk. So standard proposals there are 2 deadlines per year, one in March, one in September. These are regular proposals for public beam time over a period of 6 months, so it's not structural biology. There's a project description to be submitted, which is only 2 pages. I'll come to that later. And there's an experiment report to submit, which is only 1.5 pages. A bag proposal has the same deadline, so you can apply twice a year. You only have to apply once a year because it lasts for 1 year, and you just resubmit continuation proposals each time. And here, yeah, researchers working in the same scientific field with the same synchrotron needs, sharing regular slots of beam time. There, the project description, it's maximum 20 pages, but there's basically 2 or 3 pages of general questions, and then it's 1 page per sort of project within the bag. So if there are fewer projects, of course, the project description is shorter. Each session needs an experiment report, and then what we do is every year we ask for, let's say, an annual report where we sort of an overview of the progress that's been made within the overall bag. And the point of these bags is particularly for communities, for example, where you have lots of different samples that you'd like to measure using the same technique or needing the same beamlines, rather than everyone writing individual standard proposals and passing them through to the reviewers, who have a lot of proposals to review, as you'll see later on. The idea of bag or hub style proposals is that you put all of that research into a single proposal, which they don't look as relaxed as that. That's supposed to be the reviewers looking relaxed, but it's more importantly, it's an efficiency booster on the beamline. if you do standard proposals, you set up, the users come, you explain everything, you measure some samples and you set down. And then you set up again the next time, you measure some samples and you take down. Whereas in a bag and hub style access, you would set up, measure a load of samples from a load of different groups, for example, and then set down. So it's much more efficient and you can get a lot more done. And each group is responsible for their own samples, but you at least you can share the beam time and get regular beam time every 6 months to do that. So that's all I wanted to say about bag proposals, just to put the idea in your mind. So this is what we saw earlier on. It's the famous idea to beam time, but a little bit more schematic. So your idea, you have your submitted proposal that needs to be competitive, and I'm going to cover that here. Then there's the proposal review. So the scientific quality is reviewed by the external panels. The technical feasibility is reviewed internally by the beamlines, and the safety aspects are reviewed internally by our safety group. If the proposal is approved, we then schedule it. You may have to ship samples or bring them with you. There's another safety check at the experiment stage. We have to organize the travel and guest house for the users, set up the beamline, acquire the data, maybe ship the sample back, do the data analysis and interpretation. And then this bit in blue is important for public beam time, is that the data eventually will become public. When you publish, you have to cite our data DOIs, and also you have this report to do, which I also already mentioned. To submit proposals, all of our proposals are submitted. We have a thing called a user portal, an ESRF user portal. I put the link here. I think there's a shorter version, shorter URL of this, but this works. If I produce a PDF file, you'll be able to click on it. So our user portal, we're moving actually from an old user portal to a new one. The proposal submission module is in the new one, and it looks like what you can see here. So you basically can create a new proposal. You can choose the different types that I've covered already: standard, long-term, bag, hub, and then the structural biology ones, or the private CRGs. And then the proposal itself, just to give you a snapshot of what it looks like, there's an online proposal form that looks like this. So there's a few tabs: general tab, beamlines and labs, investigators, sample environment, safety, and publications. So you fill all of that, the PI, the principal investigator, fills all of that in online. It's the general information about the proposal. And our proposals consist of, all of our proposals consist of this, not just the standard. There's an online form, which is the same for everything except structural biology MX bag. There are sample sheets. So for each set of samples, you don't have to do one per specific sample, but if you've got, I don't know, 3 samples of iron crystal, but you just do one sample sheet of iron crystal describing it, and a project description form, which for standard proposals, as I mentioned, is just a 2-page text. Now, I'll come back to the proposals towards the end of the talk when I talk about writing a good proposal. Just to remind you about the proposal review, so and the sort of the cycle. So there are 2 deadlines, as I mentioned. The 10th of September is the green one, and the 1st of March. When you apply on the 10th of September, you're looking for beam time 6 months later. So when you apply on the 10th of September, it's to get beam time in what's called our cycle 1. So for example, if you submit in September this year, 2025, you'll be applying for beam time in 2026-1, which is from March to July next year. If you apply in the March deadlines, you're always applying for beam time 6 months later again, from the middle of August to the end of February of the following year. Okay, so there's a 6 to 12 month delay between the submission and the actual use of the beam time. The review panels meet at the end of October and the end of April, and so the results come out in early December, 1st of December and the 1st of June typically. So then there's time to prepare for the experiment. There's another deadline, which is on the 15th of January. That's specifically for long-term proposals and for hubs. Our proposal review process, the only reason I wanted to show this is we do the 3 reviews, the technical assessment, the safety assessment, and the scientific assessment. Then our panels meet. So they meet, half of them meet online every year, and the other half meet in person. They have real meetings where they discuss all of the proposals, and then they recommend to management the proposals to accept. Then we have to, because of our funding model, we have to apply what's called a country balance. And this is where, for example, if you're from a non-member country, this country balance, we try to ensure that there's a fair return, fair scientific return for investment for the member countries. Okay, and then so management considerations have to be applied, and then we approve and send the decisions. There are 13 panels. the way our review structure is set up is that the panels are beamline based. So depending on the beamline you request, they're reviewed by a certain panel. So they're not science based. So if you apply, for example, for beamtime on ID 11 and ID 15A, it will be seen by 2 panels. And we have currently, actually, it's just gone up to 151 international scientists serving on the 13 panels. So there's a lot of reviewers. And we split our proposals into like 12 main scientific areas, which are listed here. Okay. We do our stats based on these 12 areas. Coming back to the proposal content. So this is, I was saying how to write a good proposal, let's say. So as I mentioned, there's an online form, the sample sheets, and the project description form. The project description form, of course, is that's the description of your proposal. That's the real proposal format. So it's 2 pages. It's a challenge, but everyone has the same challenge. So the idea is to keep the same structure so that the reviewers can really find the information they're looking for. And the picture here shows our template. We have 6 sections: the proposal summary, where you give the motivation and the hypothesis, what you're looking for, a scientific background section, an experimental plan section, the justification of the beamline and beamtime needed, the results expected and their impact, and then any references. And of course, figures are encouraged. It's a PDF, it's a Word doc that then gets uploaded as a PDF. So anywhere in those 2 pages, of course, we encourage the use of figures, because sometimes a figure, it's easier to explain with a figure rather than a whole paragraph. And in our proposal template, we give help text. You can see these boxes in gray. You have to remove them before submission, but they help. They give a lot more detail about what kind of information is expected in each of these sections. So when you download the templates from our website, you get this help text with it. General points: we get about 1,200 proposals submitted per call, so that's nearly 2,500 every year. It's a lot. We can accept about 500, just under 500. So there's a 40 to 45% acceptance rate, which is pretty good. It's nearly a 1 in 2 chance of getting accepted. So the only thing is there's a good chance, but the reviewers do see a lot of proposals. And so the question is how to make yours stand out, right? So in a nutshell, so I found a nutshell. In a nutshell, an excellent science or innovation case, it needs to be technically strong with a clear experiment plan, well written, of course, structured, clear English, no spelling mistakes, no silly errors. For example, requesting an ESRF beamline and in the project description text, something you've copied and pasted from Elettra and it's requesting an Elettra beamline, for example, because when they've got a lot to read, these are good excuses to say, okay, no. Right. I put here, I'm not going to go through all of them, but then if you end up with a PDF file of this, you at least have the information. So only less than 1% of our proposals are rejected. Almost all of the others are projects that could be done and that could give useful results. So our grading guidelines even recommend to the reviewers to sort of put them into could be done, should be done, must be done highlights. Of course, that's why it's really important. They're all good, so you have to somehow make yours stand out. And the best way to do that is to gear them towards research that specifically benefits from synchrotron radiation. Targeted proposal, avoiding being too vague. We hope to, we're going to measure 75 samples and we hope to find, that's a bit too vague. We strongly recommend, where possible, having done preliminary measurements or characterizations, for example, in a laboratory source where you've got all of the information you need, and the only thing left to get is the information that synchrotron radiation would give you. The proposal has to be self-contained. So, and also because of the number of proposals we receive, not all reviewers will be experts in your field. So you have to, the important information has to be in the proposal. Don't assume that they will know it, or don't assume that they will go and look up information from references, for example. The most important thing should be in there. So you need to prepare. Go to the next page. The project description form that I showed you already, that of course is the main document. Make sure you download the latest template, because they get very upset if it's the wrong template, because it's difficult then to compare proposals. To respect the format and the length. Some of them print them out, and that's why it's important to respect the font size and things like that. If it's too small, they can't read it, and they don't read it. They do read it, but they get angry and upset. And a figure is always useful, as I said earlier on, to replace a few words. And one of the big messages I would pass on is do consult the Beamline staff. They don't mind. They are busy, yes, but they want you to contact them. They like the fact that users contact them in advance. They don't need to be co-proposers, and just because you've contacted them to get help doesn't mean that they should be, in fact, they shouldn't be co-proposers. Co-proposers should only be the scientific drivers of the proposal. So they shouldn't be on the proposal unless they're one of the people really involved in the proposal itself. But they can give you advice on your experiment plan. They can give you advice on the number of shifts required. And they can really sort of help to sort of gear and target and write the proposal in the way that, not to write the proposal for you, but make sure that the plan corresponds to the questions that you're asking, if that makes sense. Now, what I put here down the bottom, I put a link to a document that's on our web pages, advice on writing a good proposal. It's much more detailed than what I've just told you here. It really goes in detail into each tab of the online proposal form and each part of the experiment of the project description form. So if you do want to write a proposal for the ESRF, do use this link to go and see some more ESRF specific information. What I'm just putting here, again from Reynier, is just to show you, because what I've explained now is ESRF, but almost every synchrotron, European and Spring 8 and American synchrotrons, the Canadian light source are all the same. They all want the same thing, basically, clear motivations and objectives and a clear scientific plan. Focus the problem. You're looking for a problem and you nail it. You're testing a hypothesis. The plan must correspond to the instrument capabilities and the beam time. And it's really important to clearly explain how the results you're going to get will help you solve the problem that you're saying that you're looking into. Okay, so I took this slide from Reynier on purpose because this was given in a completely different talk, but all of us want the same thing. Okay, so it's a generic information. Lastly, my last two slides is just to say, for the reporting part, all synchrotrons, and proof is I don't have one that I can show without sort of breaking our GDPR. So I borrowed this one from Elettra, which they do use in talks, but ESRF is exactly the same. It's a page and a half experiment report. So at the end of your beam time session, you have 3 months to submit a report like this. Those reports are made available to our proposal review panels, and they look at them to see if you're effectively using the beam time. These reports should include some sort of preliminary data analysis. They are confidential. They never used to be. They're now confidential until the end of the data embargo period. So you can feel free to put some results and preliminary data analysis and interpretation, discuss the relevant results obtained, and explain any problems. So you could say, for example, we were only able to measure three samples because I don't know, the detector broke. So that's useful because then we know that you haven't been able to make the maximum use of the beam time. So those are really important. It's a page and a half. And then publications. So of course, use of publicly funded ESRF beam time, publications are our principal key performance indicator. And because it's publicly funded, of course, you're expected to put your results in the public domain. So you can see this is our ESRF publications. You have to upload them in our database as well, but register them in our database so that we know about them. Our librarians also look for ones that aren't registered, but it's what we ask the beamlines to do. Your publication record is important because it's now, in order to get further beam time, because now the proposals, if you write a new proposal, your ESRF publication record is automatically put into the new proposal. So you have to publish and you have to register and you have to import those publications into your user portal profile. If you don't have any ESRF publications, there's a section in the proposal form, either for new recent users who've never used the ESRF or from people who've done relevant work but not at the ESRF, let's say. Okay. So all of those can be put into the proposal form. And my last slide is what I mentioned earlier on. The additional thing that you get with ESRF public beam time is we pay contributions. So we don't pay the full cost because we pay contribution according to our rules. So we contribute to the expenses of 3 scientists, 4 or 2 for certain other experiments. So we pay their travel. We pay, there's accommodation on site, and if you're a reimbursed user, the accommodation is also paid. If you're not reimbursed, the accommodation costs around 62 euros per night with breakfast included. And we have an on-site restaurant. And the same thing, if you're a reimbursed user, the meals are covered and paid to the limit of two meals a day. Of course, financial support is limited to researchers who are affiliated to our member or associate member countries, but we do cover all of those costs. The beam time is free, and we cover those additional costs for 3 scientists per experiment. And that is it. I think I've finished, so I'm happy to hear any questions if you have any.